listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the College Football Week 9 preview for Thursday, October 24th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
Football season's racing right on by. College football, monster games, playoff ramifications. It's amazing how rapidly the season's going by. We got big games. Now we're getting to the point we're going to start dealing with teams looking to be motivated to get to the bowl season. Great information coming from our pal Bruce Marshall. I'm Brian Blessing in Las Vegas. Let's dive right in. Hello, Bruce. It is absolutely terrifying how fast the season's going by. You look back at the opening game, Auburn and Oregon, and how one game had such a massive impact because Oregon's on a dead run now, but you get no wiggle room when you're in the Pac-12, and we start really looking ahead now and sorting out this playoff race too.
Yeah, you do, Brian. And even right at the top there, I just projecting down the road, and there's a lot of football to be played, so I'm reluctant to do this, but I mean,
I'm afraid what you're going to say. I got a bad feeling. Go ahead.
But I mean, you could also almost see if Ohio State and Clemson and Oklahoma all stay unbeaten. The loser of Alabama LSU, and if that regular season game, and one of those two goes on to win the SEC, somebody in that top five is going to get left out, and it might be one of those one-loss SEC teams. So would you leapfrog one of those over an Oklahoma State? You want to talk about the mother of all controversies, that would be coming. And then there are some of these one-loss teams that are sitting there that could back their way in there if results go a certain way. And there sits Notre Dame among a few others.
That's the nightmare scenario. It truly is. Penn State's sitting at 6. It would be a tall order if they can survive the Michigan State defense off a bye. You basically, I think you're getting a one-shot winner-take-all. Although the Big Ten's been phenomenal this year, but you know the drill. If Alabama, LSU's close, you know how that ends up shaking out. And you sit here with Notre Dame. If they beat Michigan, the only one I can see them conceivably losing would be in some bizarre sort of track meet game would be Boston College. But Notre Dame doesn't play a conference championship game, Bruce, and two teams ahead of them are going to lose, and they're going to get in again.
Well, yeah, so that's why I will get to this Michigan game in a little bit. But you look at Notre Dame's schedule. Navy might be a little tricky here. Navy's confounded them a couple of times, and so has Boston College. If Stanford plays like it did against Washington, maybe. But if Stanford plays like it did against UCLA, no chance. And then Virginia Tech, no. Duke, no. I don't think so. It's set up. If they can beat this game against Michigan, they will certainly be favored the rest of their games into December.
All right, and then we have a game today with unbeaten SMU, a 14-point favorite with just an electrifying offense. Total on this game is 65.5 at Houston. And, you look at SMU down the road after this one. Tough one at Memphis, East Carolina. Navy's never easy and Tulane's better. But to this point, SMU has been on a wild ride, Bruce. I mean, my goodness, they score in the mid-40s every game. Is 65 a total that's too low for this game tonight? Because we know the dangers of being a ranked team going on the road and playing under the lights on a weeknight game.
It could be. This could be a banana peel. Houston, it's been a disappointing first season there for Dana. And, the quarterbacks, with the quarterback thing with Derek King, leaving, then coming back, then redshirting, and his backup Tune got hurt. And it was his son was perhaps slated to go tonight at quarterback, but it's going to probably be Tune in there for Houston. And, maybe they could put up a fight, but, SMU is in pole position now to be the group of 5 rep in the New Year's Six. Although if SMU loses a game, keep an eye on Appalachian State.
Yes.
Which is sitting there at 6-0 and has a game at South Carolina, though, coming up, which will be very interesting in a couple weeks. But that might turn out to be the team. So there's a lot of football to be played. I think SMU gets there tonight. I think your overcall is probably correct. Bouchel has turned into a really nice fit there. It's a good marriage between Bouchel and Sonny Dykes. They both came around at the right time for one another, saved Bouchel's career, saving and giving Dykes a real boost here at SMU. So I could see that SMU in the over tonight.
Hey, just out of curiosity, you mentioned that we handicap games, but let's handicap in this race. SMU sitting at number 16. App State's at 21. If App State were to win that game against South Carolina, name program, name conference, how many teams would they leapfrog as a result of beating a quality opponent?
They could leapfrog some because some of those other teams are going to lose. If App State keeps winning, even if they didn't have South Carolina on the schedule, they'll keep moving up. They already won at North Carolina. That wasn't bad. Not a great team, but that's a good win over Power 5 on the road. And this would solidify their credentials. I think it's more of a danger there. It would probably scuttle App State's hopes to get into a New Year's Six Bowl if it should lose at South Carolina. But if it wins, I think they're going to be tracking SMU and taking it and leapfrogging SMU in case the Mustangs lose. And they certainly could. Tonight, they've still got to go to Memphis. They've still got to go to Navy. Then they'll have the conference championship game, and that could probably be UCF. SMU's got a lot of hurdles still to overcome.
Bruce, with the Hunt for Red October Scuttle reference, and we're in the hunt for winners, so let's go. Tonight, we mentioned SMU and Houston. What do we do tomorrow night, Bruce? USC, Colorado. USC laying 13.5. Total on the game is 63. Colorado's kind of a tough team to gauge 1 week to the next. USC, it seems like the offense is at least in gear now.
And Colorado, I think, is flat out bad right now. The defense is not. They've had some injuries in the secondary, and some of Mel Tucker's defenders there in Boulder are trying to tell me, he's had some defensive injuries. No, this hire has not worked. This is a year it was supposed to work for Colorado. You've got a senior quarterback and some weapons on offense that should make some things happen. They have allowed 30 or more points in every bloody game this year, and Tucker's supposed to be a defensive mastermind. He is no upgrade from Mike McIntyre, and Montez, the quarterback. This offense has ground to a halt. 13 points total the last 2 weeks, and Montez he doesn't run anymore. So I think Colorado, we'll see. I think UCLA's got a shot at them in a couple of weeks, and that would mean Colorado's the worst team in the Pac-12. And so they don't have a shot, I don't think, here in this one. I think SC goes in there and wins. They're still playing hard for Clay. And we had it 38-23 Trojans on Friday.
Okay. So you got it at a 15-point margin, 13. I was going to say, you anticipate that by kickoff the game goes to 14, but maybe beyond that, should we be wary of USC having Oregon in the on-deck circle?
Well, my thought is, maybe. We saw Wisconsin, although the look ahead, you're never quite sure. Wisconsin might have lost that game anyway last week. Sometimes I think the look aheads are more things for coaches and fans. Players, I don't think it impacts as much as people think. And just thinking back to a long time ago when I used to play, it's just the next game is the one you're thinking about. And fans and others think about the game ahead. And sometimes coaches coach that way too. So that's the other thing to think about. But SC is playing hard for Clay, and I think that's more important than anything.
Bruce, sports betting is a wonderful thing, and here's a great example why. Connecticut is a 10-point favorite at UMass. The total on the game is 62. Somebody's got to win, and somebody will be paying attention.
Yes, I think this is the game of the week, if not the game of the year. For me, I'll be looking for this somewhere on the TV on Saturday. Get to see these teams. Where do you get a game that matches the 130th and the 124th ranked defenses? 130th ranked defense, the Minutemen, and the 124th ranked offense, UConn. So there you have the immovable force against the movable object here. So that's a great thing. But I can't see laying points with UConn on the road. How about this? I think UConn has gone like 16 straight as a favorite, not covering. And the last coach who covered a number as a favorite for UConn was Paul Pasqualoni back in 2012. So I want to say it's 19 straight now that UConn has failed to cover as a favorite. So that's all I need to jump on the UMass bandwagon here. 35-31, UConn, I think they can survive. By the way, they did get kind of physical with Houston last week. UConn was playing them tough. But I think UMass will look at this. They did beat Akron earlier this year. And, why not make it a daily double? Give it a shot here against UConn.
Hey, San Jose State is at Army, and San Jose State has had their moments this year. Army, it's been a grind for these guys, land 9.5. The one thing I would take a peek at here is the total of 53.5. San Jose State can score, and it's tough for a team like San Jose State after playing San Diego State, which was probably a physical game for them, to prepare for this offense. I kind of lean in Army's way, but San Jose State's had their moments. Honestly, this is a game I do believe features points.
Well, it could, and it's possible. Although Army is really kind of disappointing now. I mean, I'm not sure Army's going to even get bowl eligible the way this is going. Teams have kind of figured this out. This offense has grind to a halt the last 2 weeks. They failed to cover a point spread 4 in a row. San Jose has prepped for Army. They prepped for Army last year. They played Air Force a couple weeks ago. They're flying. I mean, this is part of this flying circus, though, for San Jose, which is taking them all around the globe. I mean, they've cash a lot of frequent flyer miles here. That game last year was actually a competitive game into the second half, and San Jose had a meltdown like I've never seen, with a fumbling like 4 plays in a row and setting up Army for easy scores, and that thing suddenly ballooned out of sight. San Jose is not a bad team this year, and I think they can hang around. 29-24 our score forecast. Maybe your total thing is right. Maybe we got that score too low, but I kind of like the San Jose side as the first call here.
Here's one maybe a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, well, tell me about it. Good game. I mean, a really good game. Troy, Georgia State 1.5 at home. Total's up there at 66.5.
And it is. And, Troy's won 3 straight in this series. Last year the quarterback Barker got hurt in this game. He's got 16 touchdown passes this year. Georgia State's defense, we mentioned it did slow down Army a couple weeks ago, but passing teams have bothered them. They've given up 35 per game, and they rank 114th in pass defense. So statistically, Georgia State doesn't play much defense. Playing here at the old Turner Field hasn't been much of a home edge for them. And Troy has a pretty good history as a road chalk, 7-2 their last 9. So we'll give the Trojans a shot here. 38-30 updated score forecast will take Troy in Atlanta.
Well, you got to be very wary of the look-ahead spot here. Clemson's got Wofford on their schedule next week, but they do host Boston College as a 34-point favorite. Am I missing something, Bruce? The total on this game, the suggested opener was 63. We're seeing 59. This Boston College team has scored a boatload of points. Now, Anthony Brown, the QB's out, but does this total not look low to you? I mean, Clemson, to me, Clemson's going to get 47 to 49 points of their own accord. You're telling me BC can't get 13 points?
Yeah, it does look a little low, I guess. It also looks too high, this spread. And a couple times I was burned going against Clemson this year. But I just think this looks like too much. BC, I mean, the backup quarterback hasn't been bad. They still got Dillon. They're scoring a lot of points. They're covering numbers. BC's covered 4 in a row. How about this? Steve Adazio, his last 14 as a dog, has only lost twice. And how about this? The last 6 against Clemson, BC has only lost this point spread decision once. So there's some point spread history here. There's some point spread dynamics that suggest BC is worth a look. And you got that look ahead to Wofford next week for Clemson. But, the fear is that Clemson might have been putting things in gear the last 2 weeks. Florida State and Louisville. Really good games back-to-back. And this is how Dabo usually does it. This team picks up momentum late in the season. But there's a history here that says BC at this sort of price is worth a look. So why not? 45-20, Clemson, our score forecast.
All right, let's soldier on here. Plenty to choose from. How about Central Michigan at Buffalo? Buffalo laying 2.5, less than a field goal at home. Total on the game, is 47.5. We've discussed this football team a number of times this year. They lost a lot to graduation, but the coach, Leopold, knows what he's doing. They laid 17 on the road last week, Bruce, and we actually got the money against one of the worst teams in the country, Buffalo, off a 21-0 lead over Akron. But the one thing, if Buffalo's going to be in football games, they have a good running game, and literally they are trying, and they have to shorten games. They're running the ball, running the clock, and counting on their defense, and that would be the formula again against the Central Michigan team that can score.
Yeah, and Buffalo did get there last week, but a couple of scoop and score touchdowns on the defense. This offense is not scoring a lot of points.
Nope,
like you mentioned, and I'll tell you, you drill deep enough in college football, and you strike oil once in a while, and that is Central Michigan. Mm-hmm. And this is Jim McElwain. They've covered 6 straight, and they're scoring points very very easily. Quentin Dormady, their transfer quarterback from Tennessee, who got hurt and then was out for a while. Now he's back in. 295 yards passing last week. They've got their top running back, Ward, as rushing for over 130 yards each week. And this is a pretty good Central Michigan rush defense. They rank 23rd in the country. So I think everything shapes up for Central Michigan here. And just keep riding a team like this. If it's W's every week until they don't do it, stick with them. 28-20 Chippewas, and that's actually a Gold Sheet key release on Saturday.
Iowa is at Northwestern, Bruce, and they're laying 10 points on the road. And my suggestion for everyone would be, if this is the game you're going to sit down and focus on, play a drinking game and do a shot every time someone scores. The total on the game is 37.
I know. I mean, you won't you won't get drunk that way, because I don't think these teams are going to score too much. Northwestern's offense has really been a disappointment this year, and I don't want to just react to the Ohio State game, because I can even give a mulligan for that. But Hunter Johnson, the transfer from Clemson, this hasn't worked out too well. They're just not scoring. 12.5 per game. They're down to 128th nationally in scoring, 130th in pass efficiency, and 122nd in turnover margin. So, I mean, they are turning the ball over. They can't score. It's amazing that Pat Fitzgerald has this team, sort of keeping them afloat. But Iowa ain't scoring too much either. And it's a real pedestrian attack there. They just have not been able to loosen things up for Nate Stanley, who at quarterback, well, I thought a lot of NFL guys liked with his big arm, but they just get involved in these slow motion games. And the Wildcats are 16-7-1. Their last 24 as a dog for Pat. And I think they can hang around again. 21-19 Iowa score forecast, so we will take Northwestern plus the points.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today, simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. Forgive me for doing this to you, but I'm just looking at it. The Liberty's laying a touchdown at Rutgers. Rutgers can't score. I mean, how do you cover a spread if you can't score? There's one way, and that's keep the other team from scoring. But
Well, the last 4 games, total score, Rutgers 14, opposition 177.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you are right. And Buckshot Calvert, my favorite nickname quarterback in the country for the Falwells, he tore up a pretty good Buffalo defense earlier this year, threw 4 TDs against the Bulls. He ain't that bad. 15 TD passes, just 3 picks. The Flames, this is big for them to go up there and up into a Big Ten team, in name at least. So let's take a liberty here. 24-13. Why not?
How about a good football game? Utah State's at Air Force. Air Force 3.5 total on this game is 59.5 in the Mountain West.
Yeah, this is interesting here, and a really good game. And Air Force still has a shot in this. In fact, the winner here is still very much alive in the Mountain West Mountain. It would require Utah State then beating Boise if Air Force is to win this game, in hopes it can win the half of the Mountain West, but it's possible. this is the first time Gary Anderson has seen Air Force since he was on the Utah staff in 2008. But things haven't changed much for Air Force since, but still not many people are stopping them. We'll see about the quarterback Hammond, but the backup, Mike Schmidt, he was a home run last week, 267 yards, total yards, and 4 TDs in the game against Hawaii last week. And so I think Air Force, Troy Calhoun has done very well in recent years against some pretty good Utah State teams. The UTAGs have not covered the last 4 in this series. And this is going to be a tough one, I think, for Utah State. 34-23 Air Force. I still like this team quite a bit. The backup quarterback is fine. And Air Force is going to be a very handful for some team in a bowl game coming up.
Arizona's at Stanford. Basically, Bruce, it's a pick'em. Totals 52.5. Arizona laid a big egg last week against USC.
Yeah, and it's all sort of catching up to Arizona now too. They're just not that good. But I guess you could say the same thing about Stanford here as well. And I think the problem we're having in this game is what's going to happen at quarterback with Stanford. If we knew that it was going to be Jack West, who was in there last week, the third stringer who looked very shaky against UCLA, I mean, there's no way we would go with Stanford. But they were coming off their best game of the year in the previous outing against Washington, and that was with Davis Mills at quarterback. Mills, though, late in that Washington game, suffered a calf injury. And a strained calf is more serious than people think. And he's questionable for this game. And Costello, the original starter, is questionable with a thumb injury that's kept him out about a month. I can't make a definitive pick on this game, not knowing who Stanford's quarterback is going to be. And I would not make a pick with West. I could not pick Stanford. But if it's Mills and that he's more likely to play, we would give Stanford a look. 28-22. We'd take Stanford. If Mills is in there, remember, Tate, Kevin Sumlin's juggling his quarterbacks too. Tate was pulled again last week for the freshman against SC, so it's not going too well for the Cats either.
All right, Washington State's at Oregon. Oregon's laying 14, total 65. Washington proved last week you can score on Oregon's defense, and we know Washington State can pretty much score against anybody. Can they stop anybody? I would just say this, with that spread, if this game isn't the one that would be the definition of the backdoor cover is in play, this might be the one.
Yeah, it might. And here's up until about in the second half of the UCLA game, about 4 weeks ago, I thought Washington State might be the best team in the Pac-12. Then they had all the problems. They had some.
The UCLA game derailed them.
It did, and they had some real problems defensively and on the staff too. And the defensive coordinator Tracy Claeys, who used to be Minnesota's head coach, ended up leaving. Leach didn't back him up, but Leach had one of his old guys as the defensive backs coach, and there was real infighting. Well, last week Washington State finally started to play some defense again and throttled Colorado. I think this is an extremely dangerous game for Oregon. A couple of other reasons. One, Leach has been beating Oregon every year. Washington State has won 4 straight in this series. Washington State has also been covering every year longer than that against Oregon. 9 straight point spread covers in this series. This goes back to when Chip was coaching at Oregon and Paul Wolf was at Washington State when the Cougars weren't that good. So this has long been a banana peel for Oregon. It's coming right after the Washington game. Anthony Gordon, if nothing else, the back door is going to be wide open. And I think we saw last week the numbers Oregon's defense was putting up for that 5-game stretch were a little bit misleading. They were playing teams that couldn't really score. And against a good offense last week, they barely held on to win against Washington. This is going to be a close game. 38-35 Oregon. That's a Gold Sheet key release on the Cougs this week up in Eugene.
All right, Bruce, Duke, North Carolina in hoops. We circle it. Those are games you got to see. And the relevance of Duke in football now, I'm sure the rivalry here is heated up even on the gridiron. But I would say this, North Carolina's laying 3.5. Here's one, it sticks out to me like a sore thumb. Why is this total 53? I don't see any reason that both of these teams aren't in the 30s in this game. This game this game, I got to believe there are points of plenty in this game, and the total's only 53.
Yeah, I would think so. Duke's games have been trending over 6-1 this year on the over for Duke. So I could certainly see that. North Carolina's over its last two, 60-64 its last two. So I could see this definitely. But you're right, though. This rivalry's heating up a little bit on the gridiron. You know, Coach K wished he'd been doing as well against the Tar Heels lately as David Cutcliffe, who's beaten Carolina the last three, won and covered. But Duke has been getting a bit exposed versus tougher competition. Virginia got them last week. I don't think this is a spot where North Carolina is going to go flat. A bitter loss for the Heels at Virginia Tech, but Howell, this quarterback, is still firing touchdown passes. He's got 20 this year, and that plays into your over argument here. 35-24 North Carolina. We think
there you go.
Over. Yeah, we think
that's all I wanted to hear. That's all I wanted to hear. Well, hey, and the other thing is, the NFL, I don't know what's been going on with the NFL. One week to the next, you see a result, and then you see a number the next week, you're like shaking your head. All right, well, Duke didn't go nuts against Virginia. Well, wait a minute. That's Bronco Mendenhall's specialty is defense. I mean, take that game out of the equation, and this game's a track meet.
Oh, yeah, and Duke also gave up 48 to Virginia last week, too. So, the defense gets exposed, I think, against better teams. And North Carolina whips the ball around the yard. So, yeah, they'll score some points, sure.
All right. Hey, I got to mention it. You were talking about it. App State laying a big number at South Alabama. Totals 52.5. You don't have to go into this game in such grandiose detail. But I would ask a team like App State, and you say there maybe is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for these guys at the end of the year. I mean, are these the kind of games where a team like App State absolutely has to keep their foot on the pedal and keep making statements? I mean, like squeaking by South Alabama does them no good. I mean, they know they're trying to impress people. So even when you're laying a big number, do you have to have that in the back of your mind?
I think so. I mean, they've cracked 50 already 3 times this year, and they were going full bore against ULM last week into the fourth quarter. So, yeah. But one other note, while they're doing that, they're covering numbers. They're 5-1 against the spread this year. They are 18-4-1 against the spread, against the number dating back to late 2017. That's when Satterfield was still there. They've also, they're 10-1 their last 11 on the road against the number. Steve Campbell, by the way, the South Alabama coach, might be he's in some trouble down there. He hasn't been there long, but they're not making any progress whatsoever. And Eli Drinkwitz, great name there, the App's new coach. He's a pretty well-regarded offensive guy, and he had been at Boise before and NC State when Finley was there. And this is a guy that might be ready to move up somewhere, so keep an eye on that too. 45-13 App State. Yeah, we will do it with the Mountaineers this week.
You're the historian, Bruce. I mean, you'll appreciate turning the Wayback Machine on. I mean, just like on that App State discussion, I'll never forget. It was a year. Say what you want, but in the throes of when it was relatively early in their Big Ten tenure after being an independent and going to the Big Ten. Penn State, they're playing on the road. They were playing Indiana, and game's in hand. The game is in hand. It's the end of the game, and Paterno's doing I've won 1 million games in my life, and he's doing the sportsmanship thing. Yeah. And, he didn't score at the end. He's like, he literally just, he would run the ball, he'd run on 4, he wouldn't kick field goals, he'd run the ball on 4, and, the game was in hand, and he kind of won the game. Well, they ended up being the odd man out to play for the national championship because of the polls.
35-29, I remember the game well, because that was like a 35-13 game with like 3 minutes left, and then all of a sudden the score got close. He
put backups in the whole 9 yards.
And Indiana scored, I think, on a Hail Mary in the last play of the game just to get within 6. And yes, it dropped them out of the top 2. And Paterno never forgot that, by the way. The rest of his career, when he had a chance, he stomped on people's throats, including later that year in George Perlis's last game for Michigan State. He was throwing the ball deep in the fourth.
I knew you'd remember.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, sure. But you're right. He did. He let up, and he never forgot that the rest of his career. So that's one interesting note.
Hey, Maryland, Minnesota, let's give the Gopher some love here. Laying 16.5. Total on the game is 58. Do they fit the bill of what we're just talking about?
Maybe. This is my thought on Minnesota, and maybe they're like the Baylor or the Big 12. I think Baylor's kind of legit. I'm still not sure about Minnesota. The schedule has broken so well. I mean, they catch Nebraska with Martinez hurting. They everything just fell. They barely got past Georgia Southern and Fresno and in pre-league play. But you can only beat who's in front of you, and that's who's in front of you are teams they can beat. Maryland's a team you can beat. The quarterback Morgan, not all that bad for Minnesota. He's got 16 touchdown passes. Rodney Smith, the running back, he's revitalized, 144 per game the last 6. Maryland's defense has really been exposed versus better teams on the schedule. And they haven't been quite as the sharp edge offensively since Jackson, the quarterback, got hurt. Pegram, the backup, is not bad, but he's not quite Jackson. 42-21, PJ Fleck. They're rowing the boat up there. It'll get tougher in November for the Gophers because they come up Penn State, Iowa, the next 2, that Florida-Rosedale game on the road at Iowa City too. So it'll get tougher, but for now, I mean, they're still flying pretty high.
Okay, the definition of a look-ahead game was Wisconsin last week, and they paid the price dearly for it. Now playing Ohio State. Ohio State's 14.5. Total on the game is 49.5. Bruce, let me just ask you this. In your estimation, if Wisconsin goes in and they win the game last week at Illinois by 10, don't get upset. What's the number here? Well, I mean, you're telling me if Wisconsin would have won that game last week, that Ohio State would have been a 14.5 point favorite. Now, I don't know how Wisconsin reacts. You know, they could be the punch to the gut, or this could be a mad football team. But I just got to think this number is massively inflated as a result of last week.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think so. And I'll tell you, this is going to be the early Fox game. And Wisconsin people were saying they were looking forward to the Gus Johnson effect in this game because he's going to call the game, and he's usually great for an underdog. And you could see him really whooping it up to get Wisconsin close. Maybe we shouldn't be getting in front of this Ohio State freight train. But I think this is going to be Ohio State's toughest game still. You're right. The look ahead, they went flat for whatever reason it was last week. Up until last week, Wisconsin looked like it was legit and could play with anybody. I still think that's the case. They're 11-1 against the spread after their last 12 losses under Paul Chryst. The defense should be able, I think, to slow down Ohio State a little bit. You got a big-time running back in Taylor. Cone completes over almost 76% of his passes. I think they're going to hang around here. Updated score forecast, 30-24 Buckeyes. Maybe Ohio State is just that good, and they're just going to keep rolling. And if they keep winning, they are not keeping these guys out of the Final Four. I'll guarantee you that. But I think this could be a tough game on Saturday.
All right, Bruce. Auburn, LSU. LSU laying 10.5. Total on the game, 58.5. I'm not knocking LSU. They're number 2 in the country. Orgeron's got them doing great things. That being said, I'm looking at who they played. Now, you win easily at Mississippi State. High scoring game against Florida. I don't know about Florida. I think Florida's kind of they're good, really good, but hot and cold. Utah State, Vandy's a train wreck, and then they won in a shootout at Texas earlier in the year. To me, this is all of a sudden for LSU. This is like a real deep end of the pool kind of game. Now, can they win the game? Absolutely, but 10.5.
Well, we'll see. I mean, they did beat Florida here by 14, and Florida beat Auburn. So, I mean, they've got the offense to do it. Coach O has also been beating Gus the last 2 years, although they were close games. He needed that punt return 2 years ago.
But it's not a night game.
It's not a night game, yeah. And it's they needed that game. It's a CBS game this week. That's right. And they needed the last second field goal last year. But I think LSU is pretty legit. The games are track meets, and the defensive numbers don't look as good as they normally would. But this is a defense that I still think is pretty tough. The rush defense is pretty stout. Now, teams are behind quick. They don't run as much against LSU, but they're only allowing 93 per games. That's still Auburn's bread and butter. And if Gus can't get that going, Bo Nix is going to have to throw against a very athletic secondary. There's some NFL guys back there playing defensive back spots for LSU. And nobody's been able to stop this offense yet. I'm not sure Auburn's going to be able to do it. 45-26, we're going to take Coach O, keep riding with them. That might be a little bit aggressive there on the LSU side, but I'm sold on these guys. I think they're one of the two best teams in the country, and we'll find out the next month. And they got Alabama coming up after the bye, so this is our last chance to take a look at LSU before they get Alabama.
Hey, it works its way in college hoops. I don't know that it does in college football, but I can tell you who, to me, I would believe the biggest Auburn fans in the country this week are Oregon. And, like a NASCAR race at Talladega in the draft, if Auburn were to win this game, would it flatter Oregon and drag them in the drafting position up the ladder a little quicker?
Oh, yeah. Oregon.
It should, but will it?
I could. I mean, that's certainly Oregon's only hope is for Auburn to keep winning, and they are best hope. That they were certainly watching that Florida game a couple weeks ago, and Auburn went down. Still a lot of football to be played, but you're right. When you get into November and these one-loss teams, just take a look at who beat them, and it's better to lose to a top 10 team than to lose to a team like Illinois, like Wisconsin did. So, that is something to figure as we move into November.
Okay. Let's go. Big boy football. We get a couple left. Notre Dame, Michigan. Notre Dame's won 51.5. Michigan showed a lot of fight against Penn State and the crowd in the whiteout game. Made it very, very interesting. Patterson played his heart out in that game. This is a game that has monster ramifications, I believe, for the playoffs, and that is, Michigan had best be winning this game. Notre Dame kicks the door down. You pat him on the head, right? And what do you do?
Yeah, you're right. It does. Everything you say is true here. It's interesting, though. Michigan has kind of devolved into a spoiler this year now, and that's how it's gone for Jim Harbaugh there. Listen, he is only signed through 2020 there. So he loses this one. He's still got Michigan State and Ohio State to come. I don't know that he comes back next year. And now he may leave on his own accord. But obviously, he's fallen so short in these big games. Many of those, though, are on the road. He does get this one at home. And Michigan's defense is still pretty gnarly. I mean, it ranks 14th nationally, and they're pretty tough. And they did shut Iowa down here a couple weeks ago. I'm still not all that sold on Notre Dame, like you've mentioned before. I mean, they're good. Ian Book is a very crafty and clever quarterback, but I don't know if they can actually go in the big house and win. Even that close game at Georgia, I'm not sure Georgia's all that much in the SEC either, at least as far as a super top-tier team. We took Michigan here, 24-16. Harbaugh needs this one bad. I mean, if he doesn't win this one, can you imagine the heat he's going to be under there? But it's funny. Michigan's got a lot of fans elsewhere around the country this week, and not just the normal Notre Dame hate. A lot of people who don't want the Irish in the Final Four cheering for Michigan.
All right, and then, Bruce, let's wrap it up right here in our backyard with San Diego State laying 13 at Sam Boyd Stadium at UNLV. The total on the game is 45. The bottom line is, Rocky Long, this guy knows what he's doing, especially when he takes his team on the road. In UNLV, you get the Vandy thing. Honestly, but sometimes you get the low-hanging fruit thing, and we're here and have the benefit of watching these guys all the time. Great. They went and they beat Vandy, and Fresno State in the over was one of the gifts of our lifetime. I don't know about UNLV. How do you trust them?
Well, even Donnie and Reed could tell you that UNLV was unlikely to put together back-to-back upsets. So they predictably faltered at Fresno, and you're right, that turned into a track meet after that Vanderbilt shocker. So there's a lot of reasons not to like UNLV here. One, there's Tony's status there. I mean, he's definitely on the ropes here. Two, recurring sloppiness. 5 more giveaways last week, and this has set up maybe the turnover margin of the game this year. The Rebels rank 125 in turnover margin. San Diego State ranks 2 at plus 11. So those who like turnover margins as a handicapping tool, here's your game for you this week. So unless the Aztecs get distracted by the strip, and actually Sam Boyd Stadium's a little bit away from the strip, I think they'll continue to enjoy this momentum on the road. They're 4-0 versus the line, straight up versus the line away, and they were also upset by the Rebels at home last year. So everything lines up for the Aztecs. 38-16, Gold Sheet key release on San Diego State.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Always terrific information. Went a little long today, Bruce, but it's that time of year. There's so many little hidden nuggets, and it could be the worst teams on the slate. Connecticut and UMass. It could be App State, or it could be the high-profile game. You can find your opportunities are plentiful on the wagering board.
Yeah, I'm just glad we got to that UConn UMass. That is my game of the week.
I knew you have a sick sense of humor, Bruce. I almost predicted that. I could sense that was a game you had circled. Have a great day, bud. Enjoy the football.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.